Hello there my friends, my name is Riskfish and today I'm bringing you a video of Warhammer 2 Total War. In my last video I discussed why I thought Eltharion and Grom would be in one of the remaining Lord packs for Warhammer 2 and where they could start on both the Vortex and Mortal Empires map. This video is a continuation of my last video and we'll look at what units are likely to come with Eltharion and Grom. Before we begin with the units, the most important thing to do is to establish what structure CA are using for their Lord packs. In the second wave of DLCs, CA has stuck to 2 legendary lords, 2 lord types, 8 new units which can include a hero, 1 for each race, and 6 regiments of renown. All the lord packs such as the Queen and the Crone and the Prophet and the Warlocks did have more or less units than this, but it still averages out at 8 overall. Regiments of renown were also unstructured in these early DLCs because they were added for the entire race rather than just the lord packs, which is no longer the case. It is important to note that CA said that the game was built off 8th edition tabletop, and so most of the units also follow this rule. There are exceptions such as the Sacred Kroxigors, who are added instead of the Troglodon, but there might actually be a reason for this. Troglodons are practically blind, and are sensory ambush hunters, which is a theme they share with Oxiol, a Lizardman 8th edition lord. This could be an indication that they are saving these for a Warhammer 3 Lord pack. War wagons were also added ahead of the Celestial Hurricaneum, which again could be saved for a more fitting themed DLC in Warhammer 3. To summarise so far, it is likely we will get 2 legendary lords, 2 lord types, 8 new units which can include 2 heroes, 1 for each race, and 6 regiments of renown, with the contents of the lord pack being mainly based off 8th edition. With that established, let's move on to the units themselves. So starting with the High Elf units first. The first High Elf unit that could be considered for the DLC is the White Lion Chariots, and there is some compelling reasons for this. Normal White Lions of Chrace are already a unit in the game, and these and the Chariots are the only 2 units from Chrace. This makes a Chrace themed DLC unlikely, as half of their units are already in the game and there were only originally 2 8th edition units from there to begin with. Carhill, Captain of the White Lions, is an 8th edition character that could be considered as a free LC Lord to buff White Lions and White Lion Chariots. Chrace is also not bordering any playable faction, so it does add a slightly unique starting position. However, the inclusion of Alistair the White Lion, who was added to Lothran through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, does reduce his chances and the uniqueness that he could bring to the game. Eltharion does also have a reason to have Chrace units in his army. The threat that Grom posed to Ulthuan cannot be exaggerated, and when he landed in Ulthuan he caused widespread devastation throughout the realm. Chrace isn't actually that far from Toryavris, which is where Grom was mainly active, so the idea of them contributing troops to fight Grom is actually quite sound. The last remaining 8th edition unit after White Lion Chariots is the Lothran Skycutter. Since Lothran is already a faction in the game, units like this can only be really added in Lord packs or as a free LC content. Given that it is likely to need unique animations which cost money, it makes much more sense to have it in the DLC. Grom's destruction of the Way Shrines and the attempts to destabilize the Vortex were also a threat to Lothran, so the idea of them sending aid to Eltharion's defense is also very logical. A side note to mention with this unit is that many people seem to be worried about them being unbalanced, picturing it as artillery with wings. In reality, the Skycutters don't have an Eagle Claw bolt thrower, which is the normal artillery that you see in the game, and instead have a smaller version called the Eagle Eye bolt thrower, which isn't much bigger than an actual bow. For this reason, it is more likely that they will function similar to Hawk Riders rather than as mobile flying artillery. Just an interesting note. There are only 2 hero types left for the High Elves in the 8th edition roster, and these are Dragon Mages and Sea Helms. It is unlikely both will be included to avoid overfilling the Lord pack with heroes, although there are arguments to be made to the inclusion of both. Personally, I think that Dragon Mages are slightly more likely, as since Grom threatens all of Ulthuan, Kalidor sending reinforcements, like Chrace and Lothran, wouldn't be a surprise, and there currently is no proper Kalidor representation in the game. In terms of Lord types, since Eltharion is a prince and there is already a generic Lord version in the game, I think that an alternative Lord type will be used, like how Beastmasters are coming with Malice Darkblade. The 2 remaining Lord types are Archmages and the Anointed of Assyrian. Most legendary lords have a generic version of themselves, and I would argue that Teclis doesn't currently have one, and that archmages could be his generic lord representation, which gives them a reason to be the new lord type. The remaining units I have not talked about is the hero Karadrang, captain of the Phoenix Guard, the Anointed of Assyrian and Sea Helms, and that is because all of these units have a connection to Finyabar the Seafarer, the current Phoenix King of Ulthuan. Although it is not fully explored in the game so far, the High Elves are a colonial trading power that have many territories outside the game, including the Lost Isles of Elephis, the Gates of Corinth, the Tower of the Rising Sun, and arguably Tor Elisar, and the Towers of the Sun and Stars, which are on the border of the Vortex map in the southeast. Finyabar is a representation of that naval colonialism and has a connection to all the remaining High Elf units from 8th edition, and could also be used to buff Lothar and Seaguard. It is too early to say if this is CA's plan, but I thought it would be worth mentioning as it could tie up all the remaining High Elf units from 8th edition. This concludes the High Elf units that I think are likely to be in the Lord pack, and without further ado, let's move on to the Greenskins. The first unit that could be in the DLC for the Greenskins is Trolls, as they are responsible for Grom's creation in the first place, as is revealed by this quote from the Orcs and Goblins 8th edition. Grom's meteoric rise began when, as a young boss of the Broken Axe tribe, he consumed a portion of raw troll. As troll flesh regenerates and Grom, always a big eater, had not stopped to cook the meal, the foul meat writhed in his belly. The race to regrow against the race to digest was on. A lesser goblin would have burst asunder, but Grom was made of sterner stuff. The Battle of the Belly, as the deed came to be known, changed Grom. He grew to prodigious size. It is said that on that day Grom saw his legs, yet so huge and powerful had Grom grown that he no longer needed to see them, and could instead order others to see his legs for him. Generic trolls are already in the game, however the Greenskins vex us to two different variants, which are the River Trolls and the Stone Trolls. River Trolls fit in with Grom and the Goblin style of using dirty tactics, such as their overpowering smell and vomit to gain an advantage in fights, while are also at the same time found in many of the areas in the path of Grom's War. Stone Trolls are also a possible unit, but these are more common in caves and mountainous regions, which are likely to be more common in Warhammer 3 in the World's Edge Mountains and the Mountains of Morn. The latter in particular is home to lots of other monsters including cockatrices, wyverns, ogres, giants and trolls, and the inclusion of both troll units in one DLC might also limit the variety of what the Lord Pack could offer. Snotling pump wagons are also another likely unit, as they are the only representation of snotlings in 8th edition that is not a swarm, and Grom is a champion of the smaller greenskin races. They are also an atmospherically greenskin unit, essentially being a fun random kamikaze unit. There was also a leak back in Warhammer 1 I believe that showed concept art for them and several files in the game which could indicate that they were planned back then. As far as I'm aware, the files were removed soon after though, and have been likely saved for another Goblin themed DLC. Goblin Spear Chuckers are also another potential unit, albeit an even worse version of the Dwarven Bolt Thrower. Goblins do have an artillery piece in the game already called the Doom Diver Catapult, however when you consider how poor the Greenskin range capabilities are, adding a cheap long range armor piercing unit like this is a welcome addition. Greenskins also suffer badly with large units, as they have no spear or halberd armed anti-large infantry to deal with them, so adding a cheap anti-large spear chucker would be a huge plus for the Greenskins tactically. Orc Biggins are also another anti-large units, but they aren't that great at the role and are very expensive. Bangler Squigs are another unit that could be in the DLC. Squigs have already been established as a more goblin style unit, with only goblins being able to use them as mounts. There is a bit of an issue with this however, as they fill the same role as Snotling pump wagons, so it's possible another Squig or Goblin variant unit could be used in its place. A possible lord or hero that could come with the DLC is a Black Orc Warboss or Big Boss. Grimgore Ironhide is already a legendary lord in the game, and like Teclis for the High Elves, he doesn't have a generic lord variant. Additionally, Black Orc units are already in the game. Crimson Killers, who dual wield, and standard Black Hooks with their great weapons, although it's possible for more variants to be added later on. We also know that from the lore, by the time Grom had reached Nuln, he already had multiple Black Orc Warbosses and Big Bosses working under him, many of which he killed when they protested at Grom's building of the Great Fleet, which he used to sell to Eltharion. Another possible lord type would be a goblin warlord as a generic option for Grom. Goblins do already have a big boss in the heroes section, so adding a lord option is also very viable. I think night goblins have also been established as separate, with themselves having their own lord and hero representations. The remaining units I have not talked about are the Savage Orc Warboss, Big Boss and Big Stabbers. This is because I believe that they have a weaker thematic and lawful connection to Grom. One thing that might surprise people with my selection is the absence of forest goblins. There are some reasons for this. The first is that forest goblins only have one 8th edition unit, which is the Spider Riders, while if you look at the Goblin Big Boss, he also has the option to be mounted on a giant spider, which implies that some forest goblin elements have already been integrated into the normal goblin roster and choices. Either way, the Greenskins are missing far too many official 8th edition units before going on to other sources. This isn't even including the numerous weapon variants, which I'm personally hoping will be added as a free LC in a similar way to the Elector Count units in the Empire Undivided patch. This doesn't rule out forest goblins though, however, as Gorbad Ironclaw, the last 8th edition lord for the Greenskins, does have a connection to almost all Greenskin units including forest goblins, which he used as a screen in his army, which suggests that they could actually be included in Warhammer 3 after the completion of the roster. You may have noticed that I have put more units for the Greenskins and that this lord pack is actually unbalanced. The reason is because the Greenskins are way behind in terms of the completion of their 8th edition roster, with at least 6 units plus weapons variants. The High Elves on the other hand only need 2 units plus several heroes and perhaps a lord type. So the Greenskins require a lot more work to bring them in line with the other Warhammer 2 races. So that brings us to the end of the video. If you're still here, thank you very much for watching, and I'll post my findings up on the screen right now, and I hope to see you again next time.